Oh, wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Much love and respect. Thanks for tuning in once again. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that and be here. Today, guys, we're going to go ahead and continue reading this pretty interesting book we've been reading from Augustus Le Plongeon. All right. Before I go ahead and start reading where we left off, in case you missed part 1 and 2, I already have the playlist for you. It's called Sacred Mysteries Among the Maya and Quiche. And you'll see part 1 and part 2 right there. So you can go ahead and view it in case you missed it, okay? And we're going to go ahead and do part 3 today. We're going to go back to the book Sacred Mysteries Among the Mayas and the Quiches, 11,500 years ago. Their relation to the sacred mysteries of Egypt, Greece, Chaldea, and India, Freemasonry in times anterior to the Temple of Solomon. Okay, again, this is by Augustus Le Plongeon from 1886. So we continue where we left off on page 51 of this book. And it says here, the study of the relics of ancient Maya civilization has made manifest to my mind the source of many of the primitive traditions of mankind, okay? From reading the relics of the ancient Maya, he concludes this stuff, guys. He's reading all the primitive traditions of the old world, of all humans, of mankind. Listen to what he's saying, okay? Which have reached us through the sacred books of the Hindus, the Chaldeans, so-called Chaldeans, right? The Egyptians, so-called Egyptians, and the Jews, or the Hebrew people, Semitic people, people of the Bible. So they're saying, he's saying, right? If you really start looking at these relics, at the scrolls, at the architecture, at the stories, the oral traditions, their writings, everything about them, their ceremonies, you're going to see the primitive traditions of all these old world nations, and that they wrote about it. This is what he's saying. They wrote about it in their sacred books, and this is what we've been trying to tell you. This is the true old world. When they're writing about their mythologies and their legends and their deities, it has to do with either real American people or real American places, geography. That's what they're talking about. And this is same thing he's saying right here. These haven't received them from both the Chaldees and the Egyptians, so-called Chaldees, Caledonia, Ireland, Ur of the Chaldees that we talking about, and the so-called Egyptians. The real ancient Egypt was here in America, okay? So when we're talking about ancient Egypt, right, we're going to remind everybody, even though we have proven this already in many different ways without using a book like this or these so-called Masons, right? But since we are in the topic of the origins of all this stuff coming out of ancient America, we're going to get it from the horse's mouth themselves. This is the book Ancient Mystic Oriental Masonry. You know, its teachings, rules, laws, and present usages which govern the order at the present day. True Masonry and the Universal Brotherhood of Man are one, by Dr. R. Swinburne Clymer, author of the Rosicrucians, their teachings, and the Philosophy of Fire. Okay, so remember what they were telling us here. On page 25, again, we read this on part 1 and 2 already. Just a reminder. We got people who skip parts, guys. So it says, we are not indebted to either ancient Egypt for either religion or masonry, but to America, okay? But to America, that's where it started. It says the mystic rites of masonry were worked many thousands of years ago. But at that time, Egypt and the continent of America were one and the same. This is ancient Egypt. It's the same in America. Rediscovered in the 15th century and repopulated in the 17th was recovered Egypt. They recovered Egypt when they came here, the Europeans. They found Egypt, the real one. and the promised land, as it says here, or the land of the constellation of the eagle. Okay? America, known to the mystic as Atlantis. Okay? As Atlantis was the seat of the greatest empire that has ever existed, and its irresistible armies were terrorizing all Europe and Asia. Okay? You understand? This is Atlantis. Again, America, Atlantis. And as the curtain which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America is lifted, all right, until the whole world realizes, it will be seen that the people of the eagle on the now, being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent, the true old world, the twain are one, and that prehistoric America was the original Egypt, Prehistoric America is the original Egypt or Eagle Land prior to the mighty dispensation in the days of Peleg, when the earth was divided and the great globe itself was nearly sent asunder. Okay, firstborn among the continents, says Agassiz, the most famous geologist, is America has been falsely denominated the New World. Hers was the first dry land lifted out of the waters. Okay. This is the original Egypt. We got it from the horse's mouth. We're going to go back to our book now. Okay, so when we're talking about they got it from the Chaldees and the Egyptians, have co-signed all this, you know, who we talking about? It's still the same people, Americans. And then the Chaldees, we're talking about people related to ancient America over in the British Isles over there in Ireland and everything, ancient Ireland. So they have these people have co-signed the relation in the Pentateuch, a book long attributed to Moses, but now believed by Matthew Henry and other commentators who pride themselves upon their orthodoxy to have been written in times subsequent to the foundation of the Hebrew monarchy. Might it not be possible that in Mayax also could be found the origin of the mystification of the numbers 3, 5, and 7, regarded as mystic by all civilized nations of antiquity all over the earth? Surely this mystification must have originated with one of these nations and been carried to the others either by colonists, missionaries, or travelers. It is not admissible or even presumable that the same idea and mysticism has been attached to these numbers by all these different peoples without being communicated from one to another. Such abstruse speculations respecting the ontological properties of numbers cannot be ascribed to the first workings of the human mind and its incipient steps towards intellectual development. In its awakening, human intellect, still unable to comprehend the causes of the natural phenomena that take place as everyday occurrences in the material existence of man, does not soar in the elevated regions of metaphysics or of philosophical and abstract theories. Do we not see, even in our midst, that men who live in ignorance ascribe the manifestations of the powers of nature to unseen, mighty beings of whom they continually stand in awe, to whom they tribute homage and address prayers filled with the superstitious fears that these fancies of their untutored imagination inspire in them? Abstract conceptions, numerical combinations, metaphysical speculations, philosophical hypotheses are productions of highly cultivated intelligences, of minds accustomed to reason on causes and effects, to deduce things unseen from things seen. The mysticism with which these numbers have been invested, their symbolization, and the sacred mysteries must have had its origin in material causes, palpable to physical senses, the memory of which became lost in the course of ages, altered by being transported among peoples living far away from the nation that conceived the idea by passing from mouth to mouth in the secrecy of initiations, generation after generation. The idea of a soul, an omnipotent deity who created all things, seems to have been the universal belief in early ages among all the nations that had reached a high degree of civilization. Right? So what did they say? The fear of the Most High is the beginning of wisdom. Once you really wise, you understand you're not the creator, and you're living in this beautiful created place. There's an intelligent design, basically, right? That's what he's saying. When you reach a high degree of civilization, that's what these nations realize. Huh? This was the doctrine of the Egyptian priests, starts to hijack. They called the divine intelligence Net, and placed him above and apart from the triads. Damascus, an eclectic philosopher who taught in the schools of Athens about the year 526 of the Christian era, and his treatise on principles, says that they asserted nothing of the first principle of all things, but celebrated it as a thrice unknown darkness, transcending all intellectual perception. Yeah, call it what you want. Wow, that breath, eh? Proclus, Platonic philosopher, director of the school of Athens in 450 after Christ, says, and again, these people might all be from the Middle Ages, remember the timeline switch, that Demiurgos, or creator, is triple, and the three intellects are the three kings: he who exists, he who possesses, he who beholds, right? That's that Trinity stuff. That's the hijack. These three intellects, therefore he supposes to be the Demiurge, the same as the three kings of Plato, and as the three whom Orpheus celebrates under the names of Phoenix, Uranus, and Kronos, kings of the great Saturnian continent in the Atlantic Ocean, right? So remember, when we read in Researches into the Lost History of America, that book, great book, the Uranus, the Kronos meant something. Remember, guys, this is all from America. And Saturn, the Saturnian continent, America, literally, guys, is the Saturnian continent, as it says here, in the Atlantic Ocean. What's in the Atlantic Ocean? Right, the Americas, right? This is Atlantis, right? If you want to say Atlantis, Atlantis is America. We just read it, right? So remember that research when they're saying all this. Look how it all coincides. Still going back home over here. In Chaldea, ancient Ireland, huh? The twin sister of Egypt, twin sister of America, Ireland, daughter of the Poseidon, king of the lands beyond the sea, and Libya, we find that notwithstanding the apparent polytheistic character which from the earliest times religion had assumed, it was possible for the priests and learned men, if we give credence to Pythagoras, Democritus, and other philosophers, to account by esoteric explanation for the multiplicity of their gods, resolving them into the powers of nature, thus reconciling the whole scheme with monotheism. In fact, above and apart from the personages which peopled their pantheon and were reverenced with equal respect by kings and people, they recognized a superior deity, Ra, so far removed from their first triad that they did not know how to worship it. The meaning of the names Ra seems to have been unknown to the historians. They only assert that it means God emphatically, but its origin still remains a mystery, right? Origin of Ra. And what animal does Ra, what animal represents him? It's an American falcon, found in America, literally. But his origin is a mystery, right? Isn't he a Westerner too? Yep. In Egypt, they gave that name to the sun, particularly as the fount of all things, the life giver and sustainer of all that exists on earth. La, in the Maya language, means that which has existed forever, the eternal truth. So it is evident that the ancient Chaldeans recognized a supreme being, a divine essence, Ra, to which the triads were subordinate. The same conceptions about deity existed in India from the remotest antiquity. H.T. Colebrook, in his notice on the sacred books of the Hindus, says, in the last part of the Nurokta, dedicated exclusively to the divinities, it is thrice affirmed that there are only three gods, and that these three gods designate one sole deity. The gods are the three only, whose mansions are the earth, the intermediate regions and heavens, that is the fire, the air, and the sun. But Prajapati, the Lord of all creatures, is their collective God. In fact, there is but one God, the Great Soul, Mahatma, or Mahatma. It is called the Sun, because the sun is the soul of all beings, of all that moves and all that does not move. All right, so Hawa created the soul, right? Sun. The other gods are only parts or fractions of his person. The belief in Triune God has also existed from very early ages among the Chinese philosophers, all right? That's Hermetics, guys. Of course it's existed. Check out my thought videos. It's ancient, right? That hijack. Lo Pi, a Chinese writer who flourished toward the 11th century of the Christian era during the Song's dynasty, explaining certain passages of the Hitse, says that the great term is the great unit and the great Y, that the Y has neither body or shape, that all that has body and shape was made by that which has no body or shape. The breath, huh? Tradition recounts that the great term, the great unit, comprehends three, that one is three and three are one. Huan Qin, who lived under the dynasty of the Hans, is the author of a Chinese dictionary called Chouwen or Chuwen, in which he has preserved many ancient traditions. He wrote about the beginning of the Christian era, explaining the character why. He says, in the first beginning, reason subsisted in unity. Reason made and divided heaven and earth, converted and perfected all things. And Tao Tse, a contemporary of Confucius, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, a book reputed very profound, said more than 500 years before Christ, that reason, Tao produced one, that one produced two, that both produced three, and that three have produced all things. All early writers who have given an account of the religion of the ancient Peruvians tell us that they worshipped a mighty unseen being who they believe had created all things, for which reason they called him Pachacamac, he being incomprehensible. They did not represent under any shape or figure, right? No idols, although they raised a magnificent temple in his honor on the seacoast that rivaled in wealth the splendor those dedicated to the sun at Titicaca and Cusco. We are also informed that he stood at the head of a trinity composed of himself, Pachacamac, Khan, and Viracocha. It's a quote, huh? In this conception of a supreme being, creator of all things, we see reflected the teachings of the Popol Vuh, sacred book of the Quiches, in which we read that all that exists in the work of Tasakol, the creator who, by his will, caused the universe to spring into existence, and whose names are Bitol, maker, Alom, the engenderer, Kaholum, he who gives being. The fact that the same doctrine of a supreme deity composed of three parts distinct from each other, yet forming one, was universally prevalent among the civilized nations of America, Asia, and the Egyptians. What Asia? This is Asia. This is the far disease right here. You understand? If you don't, you got to catch up. It's all the same when talking about the true civilizations, right? That's why it's the same. Egyptians, again, do we have to keep breaking this down? Again, we'll go to the Masonic book, right? You got to be 14 degrees and up. It says that twain are one in that prehistoric America was the original Egypt, okay? It is the original Egypt. America is Atlantis. America is Atlantis. This is Egypt. You understand? Or you still not understanding? You gotta understand. Okay? Naturally, these civilized nations, right? They all had the same, right? Notion, huh? Naturally leads to the inference that at some time or other, communication and relations more or less intimate have existed between them. Or they're the same people you're talking about. And guys, the farthest east extended all the way into the Americas. Asia Major, North America. Then there's Asia Minor, right? So where's Asia Major, huh? Where you think Marco Polo went when he said he went to Asia Major? They must then have imparted their traditions, metaphysical speculations, and intellectual attainments one to another. In fact, all historians agree with Philostratus and admits that commercial intercourse did exist between Egypt and India, all right? Egypt and India, huh? What India? And what Egypt? Because again, we just all might be talking about the same place. That's why it did exist. You know, America's was pretty big, and their empires in the world were pretty big. Nay more, Eusebius asserts that in the reign of Memnon, king of Ethiopia, a body of Ethiopians from the countries about the Indus River migrated and settled in the valley of the Nile. And the many Chinese bottles, which inscriptions in that language found in the tombs of Thebes prove beyond the least doubt that communication have existed between the inhabitants of China and the Egyptians in times very remote, as in conjectured from the inferior quality of the bottles that some seem to believe were manufactured before the art of making objects of porcelain reached the high degree of perfection to which it attained afterward. On the other hand, the vase with Chinese inscriptions found by Dr. Schliemann in the lowest stratum of his excavations at Hisarlik, inscriptions that were partly deciphered by the eminent Indianist Mr. Emil Burnouf and afterward thoroughly interpreted by the great Chinese scholar Fi Fang Hao when ambassador at Berlin and proved to mention the fact of the vase having contained samples of Chinese gauze shows that active commercial intercourse was carried on by the Chinese with Greece and Asia Minor even before the siege of Troy. Yeah, and why not? We started the trade. We taught people how to do that, the trade. We went out and traded. Civilization, guys. That's what I'm saying. I know a lot of people like, why he being so, catch up on the videos. You're going to see all the stuff that went down here and how we spread it to the world. These conceptions concerning the Triune God have come down through the vista of ages to the present day, preserved in the works of the philosophers, and are still held sacred by many among Christians and Brahmins. But we do not learn from their sacred books where, when, or how said doctrine originated. Boom, right there. This is a big one. They never explain how they got all this, how they learned where it originated. It's all legacy. It just happened. It's all mythology. Okay, that's a good point. This is what we've been trying to tell you. Whatever may have been the source from which it sprang, it is certain that the priests and learned men of Egypt, Chaldea, India, or China, what we talking about here? Sinai, China, huh? If they still knew the true history of its origin at the time they wrote, kept it a profound secret. They didn't know and imparted it only to a few select among those initiated in the sacred mysteries. We need not seek for information among the fathers of the Christian church, for they are as silent as the tomb on the subject. They admitted into their tenets the notion of a triune God as taught by the pagan philosophers and appropriated it, as they have many other of their teachings and theories, without knowing, without inquiring concerning their origin. This is deep what he's saying here. The councils pronounced them revelations from a high. Oh, it was God given. We just got it from our head. Unfathomable. Sorry, unfathomable mysteries not to be investigated and imposed them as dogmas to be implicitly believed with blind faith as they are today by the followers of the Roman Church, right, of the Vatican. Through their adherents, the idea of the three persons in the Godhead was found its way into Freemasonry. Listen, and on the columns that adorn the temple in the working of one of the degrees, we read these inscriptions. In the name of the Holy and Indivisible Trinity, right? This is in a Freemasonic lodge, right? Temple. And further down, we have the happiness to dwell in the pacific unity of the sacred numbers. So that's what they're saying, right? Inscribed. To those initiated to the lesser mysteries, The doctrine was presented under the garb of the complicated metaphysical speculations with which it has reached us. Such explanations of the symbolical nature of the mystic numbers were given to them so as to make it well nigh impossible to obtain a fair understanding of their purport. By the perusal of the extracts just quoted, it is easy to see that all the reasonings concerning the mystic value of number 3 and its relations to a supreme deity are mere fancies of the imagination, vague speculations, fallacious cavils, meaningless for practical and inquiring minds. So far as explaining the nature of the deity, all philosophers agree in admitting that it transcends the intelligence of man, since man is finite, basically not, right? He's not immortal. And what is finite will never be able to comprehend that which is infinite, all right? Wow, infinite. You're not the creator. You're not the master. I self master. Nah, you're not the master. Some of the Greek philosophers reflected in their teachings as well as in their writings the doctrines they had learned from their teachers, the priests of Heliopolis, Memphis, and Thebes. From them we may gather a glimmer of dim light pointing toward the origin of the symbolization of the numbers. We have said that Proclus asserts that the three components, parts of the triple deity were three intellects or three kings, a fact corroborated by Plato, who also had been admitted to the mysteries, or by Orpheus, who celebrated these three kings in the ceremonies instituted by him that Herodotus says were identical with the Egyptian mysteries. Okay, so I know he's drawing on this point. I know he's going to make a point. I know he's getting to something, guys. So let's see what he's about to get to. It says Pythagoras, who had received his knowledge of the numbers and their meaning from the Egyptians, all right, Americans, ancient Americans, taught his disciples that God was numbers and harmony. He caused them to honor numbers and geometrical diagrams with the names of the gods. The Egyptians likened nature to the equilateral triangle, the most perfect and beautiful of all triangles, and according to Servius, assigned the perfect number 3 to the great god. The Chaldees symbolized the Yusuf or great light by an equilateral triangle, and in the Sri Santara or cosmogonical diagram of the Hindus, which has served as model for many of their temples, the nameless, the great Aum that dwells in the infinite is figured as an equilateral triangle. The Egyptians held the equilateral triangle as the symbol of nature, all right, in parentheses, beautiful and fruitful. In the hieroglyphs, it was the emblem of worship. We see over the main altar in all the ancient Catholic churches the representation of an equilateral triangle containing the all-seeing eye of Osiris as symbol of deity. All right, so again, remember my thought videos, how deep, how far that goes, that symbol, right? The same emblem is familiar also to those who visit Masonic lodges, as one under which is figured the great architect of the universe, the great architect, right? And remember the eye, the peacock, huh? Let's not forget about the peacock, how deep this goes, right? But yeah, eventually adopted into Freemasonry. So the great architect of the universe, right? That's what they're trying to say is the Most High in Freemasonry. And from those countries that we have been accustomed to consider as the old world, we have been accustomed to consider, but it's really not. It's in parentheses. This is what he's letting you know. And guided by 3 words of dismissal used by the Brahmins and the officiating priests of Eleusis at the closing of their religious ceremonies. Words we have shown to belong to the Maya language. All right, these words they were using are actually Maya words. They don't even know the meaning of them. Remember parts 1 and 2, what we read, okay? The Mayan words from the Mayan language. We carry our inquiries into the lands of the West, the famous legendary lands of the West, the Americas, okay? Always these mythical places, again, was leading to the Americas, guys. They were always talking about the Americas. This mythical lands where the gods came from, lands of the West, the underworld, all that. There again, we will find that the triangle was also symbolical among the Mayas and their neighbors. We see it in the position of the three hemispheres carved, as already said, at each end of the northern chamber of the building above the sanctuary at Uxmal. We next meet with it in the triangular arches that form the ceilings of the apartments in all temples and palaces, in fact, in all the edifices of Mayax, as well as in those of Palenque and other localities of Central America. The general plan of these edifices is the same everywhere, not because they were built by the same architects or at the same period, but because their construction was in accordance with certain teachings pertaining to the mysteries. In all the buildings, whatever their size, listen, the ground plan was in the shape of an oblong square, that is of their letter M, pronounced Ma. Ma is the contraction of Mam, the ancestor, as they denominated the earth. Mom, right? Mom, her, right? Mom. And by extension, the universe. Ma is also the radical of Mayax, the name of the Yucatan Peninsula. In ancient times, whose shape no doubt suggested that of the letter M, both to the Mayas and to the Egyptians. Same people, remember where it was ancient Egypt. All right, original prehistoric America was the original Egypt, okay? Was the original Egypt. America, at that time, Egypt and the continent of America were one and the same, okay? One and the same, thousands of years ago. One and the same. Let's go back. In fact, in Egypt, right, ancient America, and in Mayax, the figure is the same, right? In the hieroglyphs, it stands for Earth and Universe. Now you guys see why it's the same. It's the same people, guys. It's ancient America. Yeah, we went out and had colonies, but it all started here. It will be noticed by examining their plans that this was also the shape of the apartments in the temples and palaces of Chaldea, of Egypt and Greece, that are the tombs of the Etruscans, hence no doubt was assigned to the Masonic lodges in our days. They copied the same style. The triangular ceiling in those countries, and there is no reason for doubting that it was the same in the lands of the West, was symbolical of the Triune God, the ruling spirit of the universe, supposed to reside in the heavens above all things. This accounts for the constellation of the firmament being represented on the ceilings. According to Zoroaster, he is the fire, the sun, the light, the later Platonists, that the later Platonists have described as power, intellect, soul, or spirit, and the ancient. All right, here's another image. So this is what he's showing you, the triangle, right? So the ancient theologians who invoke the sun in their mysteries, according to Macrobius, as power of the world, light of the world, spirit of the world, that Plutarch gives as intelligence, matter, cosmos, beauty, order, the world. Of these three, he says, universal nature may be considered to be made up, and there is reason to conclude that the Egyptians were wont to liken this nature to what they called the most beautiful and perfect triangle. It will be noticed that the geometrical figure formed at the end of each of these apartments, right? We're talking about the Maya temples now, by the lines of the ceiling, sides, and floor, is a pentagon, symbol of the mystic number 5, whose name penta in Greek also conveys the idea of universe, whilst ho in Maya, meaning 5, is also the radical of hul, the head, hence the deity. Then lastly, the number of planes forming the rooms, the 2 of the ceilings, the 2 of the sides, the 2 of the ends, and that of the floor, 7 in all, shows conclusively not only why the builders adopted the triangular arch instead of the circular, but also that the plan of their buildings was conceived in strict adherence to the mystic number 3, 5, 7, or their multiples, as we see by the height of the pyramids, the number of courses of the stones forming the walls, that of the terraces on which the temples stood, that of the degrees of the stairs by which they were reached. All right, you guys hear that? Everything, sacred geometry. They're showing it in the buildings. That's what he's letting you know. This is where they learn their whole architecture, right? You're talking about Tartaria architecture. Well, they learned it. They developed it and advanced it. But this was the origin, okay? Only 2 edifices of different construction have been found among the ancient cities of the Mayas. One, now completely ruined, having been shattered by a thunderbolt in 1848, was in Mayapan. That place was destroyed, according to Bishop Landa, in the year 1446 of the Christian era. Wow, 1446, that's where before Europeans arrived. They got destroyed by the lords and nobles of the country to put an end to the dynasty of the Cocomes that governed with tyrannical rule. You guys hear that? They had their own things going on here, right? Their own beefs, crazy stuff going on, like movies, right? Different nations, right? That's what I've been trying to explain to you. The others, still standing, although much injured by the action of time and vegetation, is to be seen in the most ancient city of Chichen. These buildings were consecrated to the study of astronomy, no doubt also to the performance of certain religious ceremonies connected with the worship of the sun, moon, and other celestial bodies. They were circular. Their ground plan formed 3 concentric circles representing the zodiac, and their vertical section in its general outlines conveys to the mind that in their inward or esoteric construction, placed before the eyes of the masses yet hidden from them, the architect wished to represent the figure of the mastodon, which was venerated by the people as image of deity on earth, probably because this pachyderm or pachyderm was the largest and most powerful creature that lived in the land. Among the ornaments which beautiful one of the 7 turrets that adorned the south facade of the north wing of the ancient palace of King Kong, all right? King Kong ain't got, yeah, who's the real King Kong, right? Priest King, the real Khan, the Grand Khan, huh? So, again, what's adorned in the south facade of the north wing of the ancient palace of King Khan and were dedicated to each of the 7 members composing his family, on that set apart to commemorate the name of his eldest son, K. Fish, the High Pontiff, are seen these symbols. Look at this. These symbols, right? Look at that. That's the Masonic thing right there. The eye. Look at that. My knowledge of the symbols and sacred characters used by the learned priests of Mayax in the mural inscriptions and ornaments of their temples and palaces enables me to understand their esoteric meaning. Their esoteric meaning. You must know what this means. They're hidden. Esoteric means they're hidden. Secret meaning. The first figure is composed of an equilateral triangle with the apex downward. Through it passes a ribbon tied in a knot. Okay? The triangle seems here to represent the whole country, the lands of the West, composed of 3 great continents, North and South America of today, and the great island called Atlantis by Plato that disappeared in the midst of an awful cataclysm under the waves of the ocean as described by the author of the Truano manuscript, who thus confirms the account of it given by the priests of Egypt to so long. All right, body bag for the illusion. What are they telling you guys here? The Maya represented 3 lands, right? I told you whatever went down, but not all of it went down. It was part of one big empire, part of the Americas. Again, lands of the West composed of 3 great continents, North and South America, and whatever went down, whatever sunk, it was all connected. It was America. Again, going back to the Masonic book, Going back to the Masonic book, talking about Atlantis, right? America, known to the mystic as Atlantis, when this ruin befell, okay? It was the greatest empire. This is America. Atlantis is America. We're talking about make America great again. How deep can that go? All right, we're talking about Atlantis by Plato. Atlantis, huh? America. Oh, now you confirmed the story of the priests of Egypt. The priests of Egypt were here. Egypt is here. Egypt is here. Egypt is here because prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle land prior to the mighty dispensation. That's why we can confirm it here in America because it's the same place. The ribbon tied in a knot would indicate that the initiates to whom the esoteric explanation of the symbol had been imparted were bound to each other, to secrecy, and to their oath. Its hidden meaning may have been that the equilateral triangle represented deity, ever watchful, always creating, nature in which we move and live and have our being, in which all things are bound. The second emblem, figure 2. All right, let's go back to that real quick. Figure 2, right? This one right here, as you guys can see. So just have a mental picture of it, because while he's describing it, right? So you see that like a diamond, an eye, and then some stuff on the top, and the curls right here. See the square, the circle, and the square, all that, right? That's all deep symbology right here, right? Let's go to it. So it says, the second emblem, figure 2, seems to have belonged more particularly to the highest degree of the sacred mysteries, since we find it among other symbols sculptured on the slabs that form the external casing of the mausoleum raised to the memory of the High Pontiff K. Okay, this is for a person right here. This second emblem is also a ribbon tied up so as to form 3 loops, each occupying one angle of an oblong square image of the universe, the 4th angle being adorned with flat folds that are emblematic of Mayax, the seat or head of the government, so arranged as to form the steps, 5 in number, of a throne. This accounts for their being placed at the upper angle. The 3 round loops are symbolical of the 3 great parts composing the lands of the West that the Greek mythologists figured by the trident of Poseidon, their god of the sea. All right, remember researches into the lost histories of America, that great book we read, Poseidon, all that did symbolize the Americas all over here, right? Like the lands of the West. Look at how it all comes together. This is deep, what they're saying, esoteric knowledge, right here, or hidden knowledge. The whole point was that America was a true old world. That was the whole thing about the hidden knowledge, the lands of the West. So again, the mythologists figured by the trident of Poseidon, their god of the sea. As to the sign, the circle and the dot in Mayax, as in Egypt, it was meant to represent the sun. It was placed in the middle of the square simply to signify that as the sun was the center of the universe, the vivifying soul of all things, so his representation or representative, the child of the 5th sun, the high priest, was the light that illumined the secrets of the sacred mysteries by his wisdom, and whose knowledge made him the fit ruler of the country. Okay? He was fit to rule. It didn't just pick anybody because they know how to talk. Talking about America, let's make America great again. And got you all worked up like, yeah, he's our hero. It's also the first letter of the Maya and Egyptian alphabets, okay? Corresponding to our Latin letter A. Oh, initial of Ah, like the Aleph Beth, right? Where's that come from? Paleo Hebrew. Ah, Maya masculine article, denoting strength, power. Ah, being likewise the first syllable of the word Ahau, king. Yeah. Ahau, Kurimeo, Ahau. Now revealing like Yeah. We know as yet too little of the religious tenets of the ancient priesthood of Mayax, to venture upon an explanation. All we can assert positively is that number 7 was the particular appendage of the third degree of the mysteries. It was considered as endowed with great potentiality, was, as Pythagoras says, the vehicle of life, containing soul and body. What motives may have induced the founders of the mysteries in Mayax, in the Mayax, in the Yucatan, to select the numbers 3, 5, 7 as symbols of the various degrees in which they divided them? We can at present only surmise. It is probable that certain natural causes, or the commemoration of important events which had taken place in the life of the nation, or in that of the family of the founders of the dynasty that governed it, suggested their adoption. The fact is that the 7 members of that family were collectively symbolized by the emblem of the Aakchapat, or 7-headed serpent. It is difficult to prognosticate if we shall ever obtain an insight into the secret teachings of the Mayas, even if we had access to their libraries, for it is to be presumed that they did not confide them to the papyrus of their books. Londa, in his relation to the things of Yucatan, right? This is books from the 1500s that we still got to get into. The book by Londa, right? He says, the sons of the nearest relatives succeeded to the high priest in his dignity. With him was the key of their sciences, and in that they most concerned themselves, because it was the priest who gave advice to the lords and answered their queries. It was the high priest who nominated the priests for cities or villages which had none, examined them as to their proficiency in sciences and ceremonies. He entrusted to them the things of their office and bade them give good example to the people. The priests employed themselves in the service of the temple and in teaching the diverse sciences, particularly how to write the books that contained them. They taught the sons of the other priests and the younger sons of the princes who were sent to them in their childhood, if they saw them in decline for that profession. Guys, we're talking about ancient Maya people here. This is a primary source. Londa, if you don't know, again, he wrote that in the 1500s. He's an eyewitness of what he's writing about, what he saw the Maya people do. Listen to what they're doing here. Listen. In order to understand the explanation of the possible origin of the mystification of the numbers 3, 5, and 7, it is necessary to know something of the people among whom it seems to have originated. If we start from the mouths of the Mississippi River and travel due south across the Gulf of Mexico, now called the Gulf of America, at a distance of exactly 480 miles, we come to the northern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Its northeasternmost point, Cape Catoche, is 120 miles from Cape San Antonio, the western end of the island of Cuba. Yucatan divides the Gulf of Mexico from the Caribbean Sea. It is comprised between the 17 degree 30 and 21 degrees 50 of latitude north and the 88 degrees and 91 degrees of longitude west from the Greenwich meridian. Its length is therefore 260 miles from north to south, and its breadth 180 miles from east to west. The whole country is a fossiliferous limestone formation, elevated a few feet only above the sea, its maximum height in the interior being about 70 feet, although its rocky surface, bare for the most part, is in places only covered with a few inches of tillable loam, formed by the detritus of the stones and the decomposition of vegetable matter. Its soil is of surprising fertility. The whole country is now covered with well-nigh impenetrable forests. A bird's eye view of it from the top of one of the lofty pyramids that seems like lighthouses in the midst of that ocean of foliage impresses the beholder with the idea that he is looking on an immense sea of verdure having for boundary the horizon, and whose billows come to die with gentle murmur at the foot of the monument on which he stands. It's not a hill, not a hillock even, breaks the monotony of the landscape, which is only relieved by clusters of palm trees that loom here and there as islets above the dead green level. Anciently, this country, now well nigh depopulated, listen, was thickly peopled by a highly civilized nation. We're talking about ancient people of America, ancient people, the Maya. If we are to judge by the great number of large cities whose ruins exist scattered in the midst of the forest throughout the country, and by the stupendous edifices once upon a time temples of the gods or palaces of the kings and priests, whose walls are covered with inscriptions, bas reliefs, and other interesting sculptures that equal in beauty of design and masterly execution those of Egypt and Babylon, okay? Just as beautiful, just as amazing. All right, but this is the origin of architecture over here. The author of the Truano manuscript, a very ancient treatise on geology, one of the 4 known books which escaped destruction of the hands of Bishop Londa and other fanatical Catholic monks who accompanied the Spanish invaders, when after a struggle of 20 years they at last in 1541 became masters of the country, tell us that anciently the peninsula was called Mayax. All right, listen, that's what they're telling you in that book from the 1500s. And we're going to read that book eventually. That is the primitive land, the terra firma, the dry land, the solid land, the first land out of the waters. It gave its name to the whole empire of the Mayas that comprised all the countries known today as Central America, from the Isthmus of Darien, right, that's in Panama, on the south to that of Tehuantepec on the north, okay? That's all Maya. Costa Rica, the whole of Costa Rica's in there. That's whole Maya. They say, Kurimeo, don't talk about the southeastern people, yo, because you're not from the eye, then don't talk about the Maya then. Don't talk about the Olmec. Wouldn't that be ignorant of me? Wouldn't that be ignorant of me? All right, yeah. The site of the government was at Uxmal, but the great emporium of their arts and sciences, the heart, consequently, of that marvelous civilization, was at Chichen Itza, that became a vast metropolis. In its temples, pilgrims, they go to holy lands, right? From all parts came to worship, and even offered their own persons as a sacrifice to the Almighty. Yeah, right. By throwing themselves into the sacred well from which the city took its name. There also came the wise men from afar to consult the Menes, learned priest, learned priest, whose college still exists. Among these foreigners were bearded men, whose features vividly recalled those of the Assyrians of old and the Afghans of today, right? Again, they had beards here. Ancient Americans had beards, all kinds of hair, all types of phenotypes. And yeah, beards, many beards. We found many sculptures, many drawings, all that on the walls, many codices, many stone, many vases showing beards, right? Assyrians from Ashur, right? Ain't Assyrians from Ashur, son of Shem? Who's the real Afghans? Isn't that a son of Ghani or Afghan? Isn't that a son of Jeremiah? Man, don't make me. Yo, shout out to Drop, all right? Yeah, because I'm in Drop University, right? Drop Nation. That's why I know these things, guys. Yeah. From Chichen, this great civilization seems to have extended its influence to the remotest parts of the earth and to have exercised its controlling power among far distant and heterogeneous nations. The fact is that we meet with the name Maya in many countries of Asia, Africa, and Europe, as well as of America, and always with the meaning of wisdom and power attached to it, okay? Maya, they know you better recognize. Yeah, you better recognize. Wherever we find it, there also are found vestiges of the language, of the customs, of the religion, of the cosmogonical and historical traditions of the people of Mayax. Many of these traditions have been recorded in the sacred books of various nations and have come to be regarded as the primitive history of mankind. Okay? All these things these people have been saying about their primitive traditions literally are just copies coming out of ancient America. Okay? Mayax. the primitive history of mankind. To quote a few instances, the creation of the world, according to their conceptions, is sculptured and forms an interesting tableau over the doorway of the east facade of the palace of Chichen Itza. It might serve as illustration for the relation of the creation as we read of it at the beginning of the first chapter of the Manava Dharma Sastra, or Ordinances of Menu, a book compiled, says the celebrated Indianist H.T. Colebrook, about 1300 years before the Christian era, and from other and more ancient works of the Brahmins. Said relation completed, however, by the narrative of the myth according to the Egyptians, as told by Eusebius in his work Evangelical Preparations. So again, who's the Egyptians, guys? Do I have to repeat it? Ancient Egypt was here in America. Effectively, in the tableau, we see represented a luminous egg emitting rays and floating in the midst of the waters where it had been deposited by the Supreme Intelligence. In that egg is seated the Creator, his body painted blue, his loins surrounded by a girdle. He holds a scepter in his left hand. His head is adorned with a plume of feathers. He is surrounded by a serpent, symbol of the universe. Porphyrius, speaking of Jupiter, the creator in the Orphic Mystery, says, the philosophers that is the initiated represented him as a man seated, alluding to his immutable essence, the upper part of the body naked, because it is in its upper portion, in the skies, that the universe is seen most uncovered, closed from the waist below, because the terrestrial things are those most hidden from view, right? Just like a lot of these monuments, like they got George Washington sitting, half naked, with his arm raised. That's Jupiter too. That's Zeus, all of them. That comes, again, Hermetics, Gustav, man. Serapis, all that, all right? So here's another symbol or image of a temple right outside. You guys see? Keep going. It says he holds a scepter in his left hand. So remember, like I just said, like George Washington holding, right, seated down. Listen, the same description. Because the heart is on that side, and the heart is the seat of understanding that regulates all the actions of man. So I thought the Mandela effect. Here, look at this, guys. Isn't one of the new Mandela effects that the heart is in the middle of the body, is not on the left side, like we always grew up knowing? Look how this book tells you. Caught him again. Why are they holding it with the left hand? Because the heart is on that side. On the what? On the left. Try to tell me, man. Come on, man. The Mandela effect. Come on, stop messing with me, man. So it regulates all the actions of man. And again, the Egyptians called Neth the intelligence or creative power. Neth, or be it Kane, seems a cognate of Kanhel, a Maya word, the meaning of which is serpent, dragon, Drakan, serpent, Kanhel. Wow. They say that this god threw from his mouth an egg, in which was produced another god called Plat, or Put. Ha is another Maya word. Ha. It means the worker, hence the maker, the creator. And Eusebius asserts that they represented Neth, or the efficient cause, as a man of a blue color, with a girdle round his loins, a scepter in his hand, a crown on his head, adorned with a plume of feathers, and that emblematically they figured him under the form of a serpent. Wow. Deep, man. This is deep right here. Well, anyone with common sense, all right? I hope we got any people out there with common sense. Again, well, anyone with common sense pretend that these conceptions concerning the Creator we find not only identical, but expressed in like manner and with the same symbols by the philosophers of India, of Egypt, and of Mayax, are mere coincidences? You think this is all coincidence? If they are not the result of hazard, they must have been conceived by the wise men of one of these countries, that no doubt in which the civilization was the oldest. Okay, so country could that have been, right? What India are you talking about? This is India Superior, and we know Egypt is here. And then Mayax, okay, that's it. It's all the same place. This is the true old world, by the way, too. So it's not just because we're saying these are the same. We know this is the true old world. The oldest, which was the oldest, that's where he's telling you, no doubt in which the civilization was the oldest, America, and communicated to others. These in turn taught them to their neighbors, as we know the Egyptians did to the Greeks. Again, we read in Genesis that at a very early period of man's history, a certain man murdered his brother through jealousy. The victim, we are told, was named Abel. His murderer, Cain. Right? We know the story, right? No doubt the writer of the book simply repeated the story he had learned from the Egyptian priest concerning the murder of Osiris, in whose honor the mysteries were instituted. So, right, dodge the hijack. What came first, the egg or the chicken, right? By his brother Set, through jealousy, making such alterations in his narration as not to divulge the secrets he had sworn to keep. Again, Egyptians came way later after Noah, so what do you mean is passing down the story? If any of those initiated to the higher mysteries were still acquainted with the true history of the murder, they kept it a profound secret, and only gave of it such esoteric explanations as best suited their purpose. Very little can be learned from the ancient historians. Herodotus always excuses himself from speaking on the subject, although he asserts he is well acquainted with what pertained to the mysteries. Right? They bullshit a little bit. They start babbling. That's what you're saying. These ancient historians, they're probably not even ancient. They're probably from the Middle Ages, the so-called Greeks, and even the so-called Egyptians. Yeah. What pertained to the mystery, and what we gather from the book of Plutarch, the Isid or Isidi et Osiridi, a version invented to satisfy the initiates of the lower degrees. Invented. In it, Osiris is represented as having become the culture hero of Egypt. And that's when the hijack, huh? Invented, huh? That's when he became a culture hero of Egypt. Huh. After ascending the throne, having taught his subjects the art of civilization, he undertook an expedition from Egypt, right, ancient America, in order to visit and dispense the same benefits to the different countries of the world. All right, now that makes sense, right? He left his wife and sister, Isis, little sister, Queen Moo, little sister, huh? Isis, sister, wife, little sister, Isin. Isin in Maya means little sister. So he left his wife and sister, Isis, in charge of the affairs of the kingdom, which she had administered, aided by the counsels of her friends and preceptor, Thoth. Thoth, huh? You know, he got his hands all over here too. Isis, being extremely vigilant, Set, her other brother, had no opportunity for making innovations in the government. Still, he desired to sit on the throne. After the return of Osiris, he conspired against him and persuaded 72 other persons to join with him in the conspiracy. Wow, that sounds like the fallen angels. Hey, let's go down with me. Come down with me. Right? Conspiracy, huh? A confederation, a plot. Together with a certain queen of Ethiopia named Aso. Uh-oh. With the queen of Ethiopia too, who happened to be in Egypt at that time. He invited his unsuspecting brother to a banquet and caused a beautiful chest to be brought into the banqueting room. It was much admired by all. He then, as if in jest, offered to give it to the person it fitted best. All tried getting into it, one after another, but it did not fit any as well as Osiris when he in turn laid himself down in it. Then Set, aided by the conspirators, closed the lid and fastened it on the outside with nails. This story of a brother being slain at the request of another brother through jealousy is also related in Valmiki's ancient Sanskrit poem, the Ramayana. All right, again, that's from the Mayas, guys. The Ramayana, they were talking about, I got videos on this. Make sure you catch up, guys. We are not informed by the author from where he obtained it. They don't know where they got the Ramayana from, right? But it has the word Maya, right? Right, and the lands of the Ramayana and all these ancient Vedic stories and scrolls, they don't know where these lands are. They haven't found them today. We are not informed by the author from where they obtained it, but the victim was called Bali, and Maya is represented as being his enemy. See, the Maya are the enemies, are the Nagas, right? The recital of this event being identical with that archived in the sculptures and mural paintings still existing on the walls of certain edifices at Chichen Itza, okay? Matching these old ancient Sanskrit poems, right? The Ramayana, right? Because it is the Maya. That's why you find the same exact thing in the edifices at Chichen Itza. And with the account of it recorded in the second part of the Toronto manuscript, would seem to indicate that the relation of the fratricide or fratricide was brought to India by some Maya traveler or missionary, okay? It was brought where? To Hindustan. It was brought to Hindustan by what? But the ancient Nagas. The Nagas are Maya. Yeah, feathered serpent, right? Snakes, Khan dynasty, yeah? So an ancient Maya traveler or missionary, Buddha. Who's Buddha? Who's Buddha, right? What's his first name, guys? What's Buddha's first name? Is Guatemala. Guatemala is Guatemala. Buddha's first name is Guatemala. And his mom is named Maya. His mom is named Maya. Look it up right now. So a Maya traveler or a missionary, or maybe by the colonists from Mayax that Valmiki tells us took possession of and settled in very remote ages in the countries at the south of the Indo-Chinese peninsula known today as Deccan. Okay? What? These ancient Maya, they did what? They took possession and settled in these areas over there in Asia. Okay? Known today as Deccan. The Khans. The Khan. They, of course, brought to their new home with the language and customs, the civilization, traditions, and folklore from the mother country, America. That's why the Ramaja, the origin of these stories, and the land they were talking about was the mother country, America, which they haven't found today, guys. We got videos on this. All right, this is deep right here, guys. This is a good review of a lot of videos and information we've kind of gone over, separately. Among these, the tradition that in very ancient times, the son of one of their primitive rulers murdered his brother through jealousy in order to possess himself of his wife, with whom he had fallen in love, and of the reins of the government. In the inflated style of the Hindu poet Valmiki recounts the murder of Bali. The story is as follows. There were two princes named Bali and Sugriva, sons of king of the monkey nation. After the death of their father, Bali, the eldest, was called to the throne, being elected sole monarch and supreme lord by the people. A terrible feud had originated between Bali and Maya on account of a woman they both coveted. Maya challenged Bali to mortal combat. Listen, mortal combat, and allured him into an ambush. Bali, not returning after a time, was believed to have succumbed, and his brother Sugriva ascended the throne. Bali returned, however, and finding his brother installed in his place, accused him of treason in the council of the nobles and before the people. He charged him with causing the news of his death to be circulated in order to usurp the reins of the government. Then he banished him from court, sent him adrift without means, depriving him of his home, his wife, and his social position. Sugriva met Rama, besought his help to avenge his wrongs. Having received the promise to kill Bali, strong in the protection of such an ally, he challenged his brother to mortal combat, although he knew that alone he was not a match for him. During the encounter that ensued, Rama, who was present, seeing that Sugriva was being badly beaten, sent an arrow through the breast of Bali and killed him. The last word of that prince to his slayer, who was standing by him, were, "What glory dost thou expect to reap from the death thou hast given me? whilst I was not even looking toward thee. Hidden thou hast wounded me in a cowardly manner, while my attention was engrossed in that duel, and so Bali was treacherously slain. We learn from the sculptures and mural paintings that adorn the walls of the palaces at Chichen Itza and Uxmal that King Khan, all right, the real King Khan, the real King Khan, yeah, serpent, Khan, serpent, plum serpent, the Nagas, right? Ain't Naga serpent? And you thought it was reptilian and aliens, man. Come down from that spinning ball, man. Have some foundation. So again, at Chichen Itza and Uxmal, that King Khan serpent, the founder, or maybe the restorer of these ancient cities, had three sons whose names were K, fish, Ak, turtle. Remember this, guys? We've read this. Ak, turtle, right? Ak, turtle, huh? And Ko, leopard or jaguar. Ko, jaguar. And two daughters, Moo, all right? Queen Moo, the macaw. Queen Moo, the macaw, who also represents Mat from Egyptian Mat. The macaw is literally a macaw. That bird she's represented as is a macaw. Mat is Moo. The wise Moo is Isis, the little sister, Queen Moo. Queen Moo and Nicte, flower. Nicte, flower. It was the law among the Mayas that the youngest of the brothers should marry the eldest of the sisters to ensure the legitimate and divine descent of the royal family. The same custom of princes of royal blood marrying their sisters existed among the Egyptians from the earliest days, and it became in after times general, such alliance being considered fortunate. It also prevailed with the Ethiopians, the Greeks, those of Mesopotamia, in the time of the patriarchs, the Peruvians, and many other nations. Prince Ko was a brave and successful warrior at the head of his followers, whom he had often led to victory, right? The jaguar. He had conquered many nations and greatly added to the glory extended of the Maya Empire. Being the youngest of the brothers, he was the one who had to marry Mu, Queen Moo, the eldest of the sisters. She, on her part, loved him dearly and was proud of his exploits. After the death of King Khan, their father, right, the country was parceled among his children. Moo became the queen of Chichen, all right, Queen Moo. Right now she's Queen Moo. All right, here's the story, her background here, guys. And many of the lords swore allegiance to her. After her death, she received the honors of apotheosis, became the goddess of fire, and was worshipped. They started worshiping ancestors, right? They create idols and all this. They made real people into gods, right? Just like in Greek and all these other mythologies, right? So they worshipped her as the goddess of fire. And she was worshipped in a magnificent temple built on the summit of a high and very expensive pyramid, whose ruins are still to be seen in the city of Isa Mal, okay? Isa Mal. Wow. Now look at this drawing here. Look at that. Who's that? That Prince Ko. Who's that? Who's the Naga? Yeah. Look at that, guys. That's from the Ramaya. Yeah. Cool. Ak, all right, the second son of King Khan, was also in love with her. To his lot had fallen the ancient metropolis Uxmal, the three times rebuilt. His headless and legless statue is still to be seen over the main entrance on the facade of the palace known as the House of the Governor at that place. All right? The, the flayed bodies of his two brothers and his eldest sister are at his feet. Their heads hang from the belt round his waist, or the slayed, maybe the slayed bodies, and the ruins of his private residence ornamented with turtles. His totem yet exists at the northwest corner of the second of the three terraces of which the palace is built. The law of the land and her own predilection for Ko were insurmountable barriers that prevented Og from marrying Mu. He was not a warrior but a courtier. He spent his life in idleness, amidst pleasures and frivolities. All right, idleness. Look at that. He was not keeping the code. He was not keeping the code, but code probably was, right? Still, he was envious of the fame won by his younger brother, jealous of him because of the love of the people, and he still more at that of his sister and wife. He allowed his evil passions to gain the mastery over his better feelings. He incited a conspiration against the friends of his childhood with the object of killing his own brother to obtain forcible possession of the sister he so much coveted, seize the reins of the government, and become the supreme lord of the whole empire, right? Yeah, he's really not keeping the code. In the carvings on the wooden lintels over the entrance of Cole's funeral chamber, in the paintings that adorn its walls, and in which that part of the life of the personages concerned in these events is portrayed, Og is represented full of wrath, holding 3 spears in his hand, engaged in a terrible altercation with Cole. From the sculptures that adorn his mausoleum, we learn that he was murdered treacherously by being stabbed with a spear 3 times in the back, and the author of the Toronto manuscript, in giving an account of that murder and its consequences, has recorded this fact and illustrated it in the first section of plate 14 and the second part of his work. When I disinterred his statue, I found in an urn, this is Legostos Leplejon, guys, not the writer, he was an archaeologist. He was there doing boots on the ground, the archaeology. He was finding all this stuff. He's telling you from what he found there. And he was able, and we got this from other books, he was able to decipher a lot of the Maya glyphs using old Egyptian script. He was using old Egyptian script to decipher the Maya glyphs. Why? Because prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle land prior to the mighty dispensation. America is Atlantis, all right? That's from the horse's mouth right there. Go back to the book we're reading. So, when he disinterred his statue, talking about Prince Cole, I found it and earned his heart, partially cremated, and the flint head of the spear with which he was slain, right? Real people. And one of the tables of the mural paintings, the body of Cole. Listen, guys, we're not talking about just like Isis and Osiris or fake people. Like these were real people. They became mythology, they became gods, and now they come metaphysics. Now you got the nether and all this and the gases and all that. That's all hijack. They keep putting hijack on top of hijack on top of hijack and keep bringing you deeper and deeper in the Babylonian confusion. Yeah. So, again, the body of Cole, right? So he's talking about he had his heart cremated in the flint spear in which he was slain, and one of the tablets of the mural paintings of the body of Cole, surrounded by his wife, his sister Nicte, his children, and his mother, as being prepared for cremation, the heart and other viscera having been extracted to be preserved in urns. A similar custom prevailed among the Egyptians of high rank, whose bodies were embalmed according to the most expensive process. The internal parts of the body having been removed were cleansed, embalmed in spices and various substances, then deposited in 4 vases that were placed in the tomb with the coffin. At the death of Cole, the whole country became involved in a civil war. The conspirators, partisans of Og, striving to seize the reins of the government. All right, and look at this. There's another drawing, right? They're trying to seize the government. The friends of Prince Cole fighting to avenge his death, and in defense of their queen, the goddess of war favored at times one party, then the other. Og, in order to obtain the preponderance, had recourse to diplomacy. He renewed his suit for the hand of his sister. He sent messengers to her with a present of fruits, begging her to accept his love now that she was free. The scene is vividly pictured in the mural paintings, all right? Again, we get into Queen Moo drop again from a whole other book and a whole other deep detail about it, right? So Queen Moo is represented seated in her house, situated in the middle of a garden. At her feet, but outside of the house to indicate that she does not accept it, is a basket full of oranges. Her extended left hand shows that she declines to listen to the messenger, who stands before her in an entreating posture, and that she scorns the love of Og, who is seen on a lower plane, making an obeisance and obeisance. Over his head is a serpent, typical of his name, Khan, looking as lovingly as a serpent can be made to look at a macaw, perched on top of a tree and above the figure of the queen whose totem it is. The tree is guarded by a monkey and a threatening attitude. This monkey here, as in Egypt, the Cynocephalus, dog-headed or monkey-headed, is the emblem of the preceptor of Mu. All right, they find all this in the Maya walls too, guys, not just in Egypt. That's what he's letting you know. He is the preceptor of Mu, symbol therefore of wisdom. This tableau is most interesting and significant since in it we have a natural explanation of the myth of the temptation of the woman by the serpent. Whoa, that's deep right there, guys. You see, here we have the garden, the woman, the tempter, and the fruit. Wow. The story of this family incident passing from mouth to mouth, from generation to generation, from country to country has become disfigured, probably by peoples that did not hold woman in as high esteem or did not honor her as much as the Mayas did. This is pretty deep here. Perhaps also an old misanthropical bachelor, hater of the fair sex, wrote a distorted account of the tradition out of spite at having been jilted by this lady love, and his version was accepted by the author of Genesis, if he himself did not make the alteration. The fact is that the author of the Toronto manuscript, plate that's 17, part second, as the artist who painted the scene just described, asserts that she refused to listen to Og's entreaties, in consequence of which the civil war continued. At last, Moo and her followers succumbed. She fell into the hands of Og, who, after ill-treating her, put her to death, together with Kay, the High Pontiff, his elder brother, who had sided with the Queen of Chichen, with right and justice. In token of his victory, Og caused his statue, the feet resting on the slayed bodies of his king, their heads being suspended from his belt, to be placed over the main entrance of the royal palace at Uxmal. You guys hear that? Where, as I have said, it remains, may be seen today, still there, guys. Wow, now you know the background behind that. If you ever go to Uxmal, you know the whole background behind this. This was real people that it happened to, like real something symbolizing a real thing. Could be the whole Adam and Eve story. I may add here an explanation of the tableau of the scene in the garden, that the present of a basket of oranges was the offer of marriage made by Og to Moo. It is usual with the aborigines of Yucatan, and yet retain many of the customs of their forefathers. When a young man wishes to propose marriage to a girl, to send by a friend as a present a fruit or flower or sweetmeat, the acceptance of the present is the sign that the proposal of the suitor is admitted, and from that moment they are betrothed, whilst the refusal of the present means that he is rejected. A similar custom exists in Japan. When a young lady expects a proposal of marriage, a convenient flower pot is placed in a handy position on the windowsill, the lower plant of flower in it. If next morning the flower is watered, he can present himself to his lady love, knowing that he is welcome. If, on the contrary, the flower has been uprooted and thrown on the sidewalk, he well understands he is not wanted. All right, you see, where these kind of traditions start, right? Where these traditions start, right? All right, guys. And again, I know you're probably not gonna like it, but hey, I'm gonna go ahead and end it right there. We got a lot of good drop. You know, he's probably gonna get it even more deeper. We're getting through the book. That's good. You know, this was part 3. We're gonna have as many parts as we need to go ahead and finish the book. I hope that you enjoyed today's reading, today's part. A lot of good drop again. And just in case you arrived late and you haven't watched parts 1 or 2, this is the book, as we're going to show you right now, The Sacred Mysteries Among the Mayas and the Quiches, 11,500 years ago. Their relation to the sacred mysteries of Egypt, Greece, Chaldea, and India. Freemasonry in times anterior to the Temple of Solomon. Right, Augustus Le Plongeon from 1886, guys. And remember that prehistoric America was the original Egypt. All right, it is the original Egypt. America was known to the mystic as Atlantis. Atlantis, right? And when they got here, the Europeans, they found and recovered ancient Egypt. All right, the mystic rites of masonry worked many thousands of years ago, but at that time, Egypt and the continent of America were one and the same. In America, rediscovered in the 15th century and repopulated in the 17th, was recovered Egypt and the Promised Land, or the land of the constellation of the eagle. All right, and that's from the horse's mouth themselves, right? Who am I talking about? The ancient mystic order of the Rosicrucians, huh? The ancient mystic Oriental Masonry. Yeah, that's who's letting you know. Where's the origin of this? We're getting it on the other book. It's all coming out of the Americas. Okay? I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. Thanks for sticking around all the way to the end. A lot of good drop, right? Make sure you catch my previous videos on these subjects that I mentioned, okay? Make use of the time, you know? You can listen to videos while you're working, while you're washing your car, while you're cleaning your house, whatever you're doing, because I'm just reading. You can just listen along. You don't even have to watch, you know? So go ahead and take advantage if you can. I appreciate everybody. Again, sticking around all the way to the end. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawaii.